talking about this concept of daring to be ourselves, which is, of course, the name of my book. And the reason it's the name of my book is when I was trying to come up with what I should title this book, I looked through all of my quotes and interviews and insights from these amazing, extraordinary women that I had the great pleasure of interviewing. And this was the one that just kept emerging, the importance of just being who you are. And while that shouldn't have to be a daring act in our society, it can definitely feel that way, since from childhood on, we're often confronted with so many pressures and messages of who we should be, rather than accepting, who and celebrating who we truly are. And we have to start to be in touch with our own inner instincts and wisdom, not just for our own personal happiness and fulfillment, but so that we can contribute our special gifts and our true calling into the world. And I was really struck, and I've done a lot of interviews, and I've actually done a lot with Jane Fonda, but the one that had a really big impact on me was right after she wrote this amazing autobiography of hers, which is called My Life So Far. And in that, she really courageously sort of documents all of her struggles that she had with self-esteem and eating disorders and her failed marriages. And she talks about how it took her until she was 60, sort of post her divorce with Ted Turner, to feel like she was truly coming into her real power and her own voice. And I connected with that because I feel like for me, it took me probably until I was about 30 to be able to feel like I was coming into a sense of myself. And it's an ongoing journey, and to feel sort of comfortable in my own skin. And my sort of overall reaction to that was, really 30 and 60? I mean, for us to come into our sense of who we truly are, and isn't there some way to kind of retain that continuously through our life so we don't lose touch with that? And one of the other women that's in this book, it's this pioneering psychologist called Carol Gilligan, and she wrote this groundbreaking book called In a Different Voice, which I know also had an impact on Jane Fonda. And in it, she talks about how assumptions about gender affect the development of boys and girls. And she found through all of this exhaustive research that she did that it happens at different ages for boys and for girls. So for boys, it may happen around 4 or 5. Let's say the first time they fall, they're at school, they skin their knee, and they cry, and they're called a sissy. And they learn from that it's unmanly to cry, and to express your emotions. And for girls, what Carol found is that it was really around the age of 11 and 12, sort of, pre-puberty and adolescence, when girls start to sort of not trust their own voice and to let all these, messages start to sink in, and, focusing on your external appearance and kind of just, not really feeling like you can express your emotions. And, I found for me, I related to this because when I was a teenage girl, I was convinced that, I had it all wrong. I looked at the pages of, 17 magazine, and everybody was blonde with straight hair, with these size 0 bodies, and I was none of those things. And I spent so much time, I for hours would, blow dry my curly hair straight. I dyed it blonde. I even, for 2 years, called myself Chris, which is immortalized in my high school yearbook. That is how much I was just wanting to be somebody else. And I had eating disorders. I used laxatives. I tried all these different crazy kind of diets. And believe it or not, I was on the mild end of the scale. I had a friend who was so anorexic, the school had to get involved. She was just eating, I think, carrots and mustard, and she was almost like a skeleton. And I had another friend who was so blatantly bulimic that it was just, kind of accepted that we just knew that if we were all out and she was, having a big hefty meal, we knew that she was going to throw up later. And that at the time was almost just normal, just the way it was. It was acceptable. And now it took me, I have 2 daughters now. I have a 9-year-old and I have a 13-year-old. And so I'm super aware of these things. And the first thing that I sort of feel about that is, sort of compassion for me. How horrible to have spent so much of my time and energy fixated on all of that. And the ironic thing is that you would look at me at that time, and I was blonde, I was thin, I had straight hair, I was popular, and you would think she's had it all. And I couldn't have been any more insecure, out of touch with who I am. I was, none of those things that, I appeared. And I feel like that was and so that goes on for so many, girls especially. And, right, I feel for my own girls, even though they're much more centered than I am, I can feel the pull. It's like this insidious virus that's like preying on them. And I even had this weird encounter with this salesperson at the store Justice. I don't know if anybody knows of Justice in the mall. About, they have like padded inserts to go in the bathing suits for 9-year-olds. And I'm just like, what is this about, And that's a whole, other story in and of itself. But so I feel like it's so important that we try to counterbalance that with positive messages to feed against all of that that's coming in from the media and from our culture. And in my book, I have a spread, what words of wisdom would you most want to instill in young girls? And I'm just going to read just a few of them. And all of these are also applicable for boys. So this first one is from Melissa Etheridge. The message I would most want to instill is, you are more powerful than you know. You are beautiful just as you are. And this is Gloria Steinem. That each of them is already a unique and valuable person when she's born. Every human being is. And then this is Jane Fonda. We need to help them really internalize the message that good enough is good enough. We don't need to be perfect. We're not supposed to be perfect. We're supposed to be complete. And you can't be complete if you're trying to be perfect. And I actually think that's another thing we can all do away with, this idea of trying to be perfect. This all sort of connects to my feelings about gender. And as you heard, I run the women's website and nonprofit organization feminist.com, and you would think that I went into that I'm going to found this website feminist.com, and I actually not only haphazardly came to do that, but almost did it against my will, which was that my husband, who has a background in solar energy, always sort of ahead of his time, in 1993, 1994, was talking about this thing, the internet. We launched this site called ecomall.com, and at that time, all domain names were free. He was going around getting the names and making everybody do websites, and I had just interviewed Gloria Steinem, and I was starting to do a freelance journalism and writing a little bit more politically, and it was a picnic, and there was a women's studies major named Teal, and the next thing I knew, I had the domain name feminist.com. And I absolutely had no clue what to do with that. I would never really have even called myself a feminist, at that time. I didn't even know what that was, so I immediately just gathered all these amazing women and organizations that I knew, and I think that's been kind of a gift to the site, and it's been sort of a gift to me because I had to come up with a definition of feminism that I felt was useful and valuable to all of humanity, and I think that I've tried to debunk all these misconceptions that I think there are about feminism. For example, that it's man-hating, or that it's about that now it's that women should run the world, which of course it's none of those things. And in fact, we have, we're very big on saying that feminism includes men. We have a column, Men's Voices, Men as Allies. We're launching a section called Men and Women as Allies. To me, it's not just about having men as allies and working towards women's equality, which, by the way, I think the world's coming around to realizing that empowering and educating girls and women around the world, it's not just a women's rights thing. It's interconnected to so many issues we care about, whether it's violence or it's the environment or war, and poverty. And then it's also about how these destructive gender stereotypes also impact men. And also, I think, to me, what feminism should be now is about human rights. It's about the respect and dignity of all living beings, regardless of all of these classifications that we use to divide us, whether it's gender and sexuality or it's religion, and to really find a way to use that to be something that could embrace, as I said, to allow everybody to be themselves. And I also think that it's almost in a Jungian way, it's not just a literal gender thing. It's not just men and women. I think it's about us all embracing the masculine and feminine in all of us, kind of the yin-yang of things. So for a woman, that might mean, being able to value and trust, her feminine wisdom and instincts, but also, and this is what I say feminine, it's like that, maybe be able to cultivate some of her, quote, masculine, qualities, to feel like she can own and use her power, or that, she can find the leader within her. And for men, it's certainly about empowering men to embrace their feminine qualities, whether it's about expressing emotions or that valuing themselves as caretakers and nurturers. So to me, it has a lot to do with just our wholeness. And this, how it connects to this thing about being who we are, I think it's really talking about our inner worlds. I feel like there's so much fixation on our outer reality that we never really look at our inner worlds and how we're doing, how we're feeling, being present in the actual moment and really being there to live our lives. And I mean, who can blame us? I mean, with the emails and the Facebooks and the texting, and our lives are so busy, and it's almost impossible. We wind up going through our life on autopilot, and yet I think that really can have a negative effect on just on the world in general, on the evolution of humanity, if we're not really truly being here. And sometimes that might be disturbing. I mean, it's normal, I think, and natural to feel upset that there's millions of children around the world who are, dying of hunger and of diseases that are treatable. Or it's normal to be disturbed by all the violence and war that's happening in the world. Or about the condition of the earth and the pollution and, the ozone layer and the chemicals that are now in our bodies and in the air and in the water. These things we rarely stop to think about, and just like an honest, fresh take on the human race, where we try to look at that and see if we can find a fresh solution to it that isn't just external. And I think that how it connects to our inner worlds is this idea of having compassion, sort of recognizing the spirit and consciousness in each one of us. And I remember when my daughter was in 4th grade, there was this one girl who was just picking on her. She was just, sort of bullying her and saying all these mean things, and she couldn't really figure out why she was doing this. And I tried all different ways to talk to her about it. And all of a sudden I found myself saying, I feel really badly for her. And she just looked at me like, what? And I said, no, because she must really not be a happy person. Because when you're a happy person, it doesn't make you feel good to treat other people that way. And so she must be really feeling insecure, or she must really be going through a tough time. And why don't you, respond with love? And it was really hokey coming out of my mouth at the time, and she probably rolled her eyes at me. But I think it helped. And I think it's, when you hear about, let's say, 400,000 women and girls that have been, brutally raped and mutilated in the Congo, let's say, as an example. And your first instinct, which of course it should be, and is a priority, is, oh my God, how can we help these poor, women and girls, and they need our aid, and we have to help them heal, and we, have to help the people that are surviving these atrocities. But you can't then not say, what happened? What is causing the men to do this? Why are they using rape as a tactic of war? Or what's part of their culture that is making them do this? And I think without sort of having those kind of fresh conversations, it's trying to really get in the heads of each other, because I feel like we're all born these pure spirits. None of us really want to do some of these things. And I think if we can just recognize each other's humanity, and I think also to feel our own power. I think a lot about what made Obama, his election, so exciting. And regardless of who you voted for, it was this kind of, yes, we can. This we, like we were all part of that. People were voting who didn't normally vote, and there was this kind of really hopeful sense in the world. And then after the election, I think, and granted, he's faced some big challenges, but I feel like it's been very much like, okay, we went back to our lives, and it's kind of like, what, he didn't fix the world yet? We are part of that change, and it isn't even necessarily in political ways. you know, it's just finding our own voice and our own power, even in, you know, small ways, like what we might say to our daughter, how we might treat a neighbor or, you know, a colleague, and really just watching, you know, our own energy and what we're contributing to the world, because that makes a big difference. That just spreads out. And you know, watching what happened in Egypt with this fall of the, you know, a dictator, and, you know, what is this going to be replaced with, and what is true democracy? And it really is the sense that each of us have power, and the sense of sort of redefining power, so that it's not anymore power over, but it's power to, and it's power with. And that means that saying that everybody, you know, has this power. And I just wanted to end with a quote from Alice Walker, and I want to say, because I think that since the theme of this conference is sort of what turns you on, I do think it's about turning yourself on, making sure, you know, you're on, that your light is on, and that you know you have that light. And so, and this is sort of what I feel like Alice Walker says so beautifully. We do carry an inner light, an inner compass, and the reason we don't know we carry it is because we've been distracted. We think that the light is actually being carried by a leader, or somebody that we've elected, or somebody that we very much admire, and that that's the only light. So we forget that we have our own light. It may be small, it may be flickering, but it's actually there. So what we need to do, I think, is to be still enough to let that light shine and illuminate our inner landscape and our dreams, especially our dreams. And then our dreams will lead us to the right way. So thank you.